On a rainy November day, I set off to visit the Fondazione Lisio in Florence, a workshop that still produces textiles and old looms. It is located a little outside the city center, but it is easy to reach by bus. We booked a guided tour a few days in advance and were excited to finally see the workshop for ourselves.
My love is queen of spring.
Weaving is one of the oldest textile techniques. For thousands of years, fabric was produced on looms like this, slowly, row by row. And in cities like Florence, weaving wasn't just a craft, it was an industry, a status symbol, and a form of art. From around the 13th century onwards, Florence became one of the most important textile centers in Europe. At first, it was mainly wool. Florentine wool cloth was exported across the continent and formed a big part of the city's wealth. Over time, silk became more and more important. Wool was practical for everyday clothing, but silk was different. It was expensive to produce because the raw silk had to be imported, first mainly from the Eastern Mediterranean and later on from other parts of Italy. Only wealthy merchants, nobles, or churches could afford large amounts of silk fabric. But silk weaving required different skills, different tools, and much more precision, and it produced fabrics that were much more detailed. By the Renaissance, Florence was known especially for its luxury silks. It was controlled by guilds like the Arte della Seta. The guild also protected trade secrets like certain weaving techniques, dye recipes, and others. They regulated who was allowed to weave, how textiles were produced, what quality standards had to be met, and how fabrics were traded. Becoming a master weaver required training, time, and approval. All woven fabric is based on two sets of threads. The warp. These are the threads held under the tension on the loom. And the weft, the thread that is passed through them. By lifting different warp threads and passing the weft through in specific order, you create different patterned fabrics. Fabrics like damask, brocade, or velvet are all based on this principle. Damask creates its pattern by changing the way the threads reflect the light. Brocade adds extra decorative threads, and velvet is woven with an additional set of threads that form in tiny loops. These loops are cut open to create the soft pile that velvet is famous for. And weaving takes time. Even relatively small sections of complex fabric can take hours or longer to produce. Every row builds on the previous one, and mistakes aren't always easy to fix. That's part of why these textiles were so valuable. It was not the material, it was the labor and the knowledge of the weavers required to produce them. But everything changed with the industrialization. Mechanical looms made it possible to produce fabric much faster than before, which meant that patterns could be automated and production could be scaled. Suddenly, textiles became more accessible and cheaper. But at the same time, many of the older techniques became less common. One invention played an especially important role, the shakord mechanism. It was introduced in the early 19th century. It used punch cards to control which threads were lifted during weaving. Every card stored part of the pattern, making it possible to weave highly detailed designs much faster than before. The system was so influential that it is often described as an early form of programmable technology. Fondazione Lisio was founded in 1906 by Giuseppe Lisio, who had a passion for historical textiles. At the beginning of the 20th century, many traditional weaving techniques were disappearing because factories could produce fabrics much faster. Giuseppe Lisio believed these old skills should not be lost. He studied historical Italian silk, collected original patterns, and opened his own workshop to keep the craft alive. After Giuseppe Lisio's death in 1943, his family continued his work. Today, the Fondazione Lisio is both a working textile workshop and a school where new weavers learn these traditional techniques. The fabrics created here are used for museum or palace restorations. For example, they have been producing the wall-covering fabrics for the rooms of Augustus the Strong in the Royal Palace of Dresden since 2016. But also fashion designers and luxury brands like Fendi have also worked with the workshop. Today, only a handful of workshops in Europe still produce fabrics in this traditional way. Watching these looms in action was mesmerizing. Every meter represents hours of work and techniques that have survived from the Renaissance until today. If you're in Florence, go to Fondazione Lisio and visit the workshops yourself. It's a wonderful experience. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the small excursion into weaving and Florence weaving history, and I hope to see you again for the next video. Bye bye!